Center on Global Energy and Policy of Colombia, where she has bring her expertise in the intersection of energy, finance, and policy. Before she was board of directors at Citgo Petroleum Corporation, where she published the first ESG report. She graduated from Universidad Católica Andrés Bello in Caracas. She later received a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University and has obtained a PhD at Johns Hopkins University. So, Luisa, please, I give you the floor, and thank you so much for being here and everybody.
Thank you, Juan Camilo. I have to congratulate you for putting together such a spectacular panel. I mean, really, it's a dream team. So thank you, Juan Carlos, Leonardo, Maria Fernanda, and Nelson. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. So that you guys have an idea of the stellar panel that we have. I mean, three out of the speakers that we have today have been either ministers of energy or undersecretaries of energy of their respective countries, and also energy regulators. They all have fantastic experience both in the public sector, in NGOs, and in the private sector. I'm gonna start with Maria Fernanda Suarez, who is currently the country manager of Accenture in Colombia, but she served as Colombia's Minister of Mines and Energy from 2018 to 2020. So she was a key actor in driving the energy diversification or energy transition in her country. Previously, she was the Executive Finance and Strategy Director of Ecopetrol. So she also has experience in national companies, and she also has a master's degree in policy management from Georgetown University. We have Juan Carlos Jobet, who's just fresh out of the oven as the latest former Minister of Energy and Mining in Chile. He led Chile's successful energy transition, including a thorough carbon neutrality plan for the energy sector. Through his very impressive career, he has held several positions in both the public and private sector. He holds an MBA and MPA from Harvard University and a bachelor's degree in economics from Catholic University of Chile. And he's also the most recent distinguished visiting scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy, and therefore my colleague. My other colleague, Leonardo Beltrán, is also a distinguished visiting fellow at Columbia University Center on Global Energy Policy. Mr. Beltrán has had a very distinguished career as a public service in government of Mexico, including as the longest serving Deputy Secretary of Energy, and was also a key actor in driving forward the energy transition in Mexico. He holds a master's in Public Administration and International Development from Harvard University School of and a Bachelor of Science in Economics from ITAM. And Mr. Nelson Narciso, who is president of NNF Energy Consultancy in Brazil. He is, and in Africa as well, he has been a director at the regulatory agency in Brazil. He has over 40 years of experiences in oil and gas industry in every part of the oil and gas industry, in services and in development. So he is a mechanical engineer, postgraduate in industrial administration and economic engineering. So given the big expertise, long expertise of this panel, I would love to start with, and given that you all are from different countries, if you could start with talking a little bit about your experience from either a regulatory perspective or from a public sector perspective on the challenges and opportunities of the energy transition. And I'm going to start with Maria Fernanda, please.
Well, thank you very much, Luisa, for the introduction. Very happy and to Columbia Global Energy Center for inviting me to this panel. Very happy to be with all these great panelists today. Well, I think that in terms of challenges and opportunities that we see in Latin America, I think that we have plenty of opportunities in terms of energy transition. Not just because, and I think we will go through each of the countries, are very rich in terms of the resources in clean energy, and that will be a great opportunity for us as a whole, but also because our countries will be able to accelerate really, and this is what we have been seeing in the last year, this energy transition. Regarding, and I think that on part of what we are seeing after when we are seeing all the Russia-Ukrainian crisis is that we will be balancing again, and in the public discussion, all that has to do also with energy security. And I think that energy security will be absolutely key, also affordability. because many of the challenges that I was seeing before this crisis started was that the energy debate was migrating only around sustainability, and we were forgetting about security, reliance, and affordability. And I think that affordability, it's absolutely key for everybody, of course, but we in Latin America should be very careful about being assured that energy transition doesn't go against affordability in energy. Regarding the challenges, I will say that from the Colombian experience, the main challenges at the beginning, but I think that's a barrier that we have already went through, was the resistance of the incumbents. So there was some resistance at the beginning. Colombia has a very clean energy power mix, since we have 70% of our energy coming from hydro. So the power mix was already clean enough. And so there wasn't really, I will say, an urgent call for us to clean the mix. Then I will say the challenges were really designing all the regulatory framework, incentives that we will talk further. And then in the implementation and construction phase, there were also some challenges. In terms of a whole of Latin America, I think that the one of the most interesting things to discuss is at which speed should we accelerate the energy transition. And my belief on that is that we should be careful, that we should have to accelerate the energy transition, but keep an eye on speed that does not risk reliance and do not put affordability as a very heavy weight to our citizens.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Juan Carlos, I mean, representing a country that is in this panel, the only energy importing or oil and gas importing country, would love to hear your views about what Maria Fernanda has just said, but also from the things that you've seen with Chile and both the opportunities and the challenges you've seen in the energy transition.
Well, thank you so much, Luisa. It's great to see you. I hope we can meet face to face soon. Maria Fernanda, with Maria Fernanda, we shared many other forums when we were government officials. It's nice to see you again, Leonardo and Nelson. Nice to see you both. So
nice to see you, and hope you're resting after you just ended your job. I was thinking when I ended, as I said, I thought about Juan Carlos. Said, well, good that you are right now in the academy, so you can cool off a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying, but you know, as is your case, we kind of are all day doing things.
Yeah,
we can't stop that. Anyway, so I tend to agree, Luisa, with most of the things that Maria Fernanda said, and I think the challenges that she mentioned for Colombia are relevant, most of them for the Chilean case as well. I would add to those some of the challenges we're facing here that I think also are being faced by other countries, which are the intermittency of renewable energies. In terms of the operation of our system, we have a lot of renewable potential. We are developing solar and wind capacity. Just to give you a number, we basically doubled our solar and wind capacity last year in spite of the pandemic. There are days today in Chile during the summer in which over 55% of the electricity is supplied by solar and wind capacity. But then at night, especially since we're facing a very severe drought, we are burning a lot of coal, natural gas, and at some times of the day, even diesel, right? So how do we accelerate the deployment of renewables? At the same time, having a reliable, stable operation of the grid, I think that is a big challenge here, and I mean in many other countries. Storage, as was mentioned in the previous panel, is gaining traction, but still very expensive. That's the truth. We have some hydropower, but the drought, as I said, it's hurting the operation. So that's one issue, I think, or one challenge I see. And on the power grid, the other challenge we face is transmission infrastructure. We have, as you know, we are a very narrow strip of land, and most of the good solar resources are in the extreme north, and most of the demand is in the center of the country. So people don't want coal plants, they don't want to burn diesel, but they don't want transmission lines either. So building transmission lines, it's a technical challenge, a financial challenge, but it's also a social challenge. I mean, how do we convince communities that we need that infrastructure to navigate the energy transition? And oil and gas, we're facing challenges as the rest of the world is, especially during this crisis. We've been able to secure, the volumes we require, but the prices everywhere else are very, very high. That's hurting households in a context of very high inflation, an economy that is recovering after COVID. So that's a complex piece of the equation. But I think that is more, hopefully, short term, right? In the long term, I think the flexibility challenge of the power grid is probably one of the biggest challenges we have.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Nelson, I would love to hear how Brazil is facing these challenges, because on the one hand, it is a very diversified power superhouse, right? It has everything. And so, but it has some of the issues that both Maria Fernanda and Juan Carlos have mentioned about intermittency and hydroelectricity impacts of droughts. So we'll be very interested in learning and knowing about how you see these issues. You're muted, Nelson. Sorry, you're muted.
Okay. Well, very good afternoon, Luisa, and my colleagues panelists here. It's a great pleasure to be here sharing the vision of old petroleum man in transition. I fully agree with Maria Fernanda, and I also tend to agree to Juan Carlos, especially on challenges and opportunities. The transition brings. But when you talk about Brazil, I think, as you mentioned, Luisa, Brazil is a country with the cleanest and maybe one of the most diversified energy matrix in the planet. We are in a very, very good position with hydro, wind, solar, and Brazil has been in the biofield for a long time. I think it's good to mention that back to '73, we started the project of Proálcool, and since that time we've been, evolving in that situation. The other thing that I think it's important to mention is that Brazil, I believe, stands in a position that the world would like to be. We at this point in time, we are in between 45 to 48% of renewable already. And this brings, for me, a big challenge that Brazil, I believe, is facing right now, that is to keep the low carbon matrix. If you see the problems of firing in the rainforest, a couple of weeks ago, the state of Santa Catarina has sanctioned a law to extend coal fire, for additional 30 years. The other things that we may need to take care is the problems of the drought that we've been facing. Last year, we had the worst drought in 91 years. And that's why we had to dispatch more natural gas. And this being said, those are the real, let's say, threatening and challenge that I see for our situation. Opportunities, I keep seeing a bunch of opportunities as Brazil has taken advantage of the natural resource by putting together very good policies that allows us to be the point that we are now. We see the same sort of trends. I mean, for example, on the hydrogen, Brazil has just launched a national hydrogen program. And the idea is putting team to think on the best way, not only use, but to make the best use of the hydrogen, and think as well about, I mean, the regulatory framework for that. The other good things that we can see in Brazil at this point in time is the new gas that we call the new gas program. I mean, last year, the country sanctioned the new gas law, and the gas for sure will be the transition energy, and this will bring a lot of good opportunities for Brazil, because especially when you talk about the gas that came from the pre-salt. So in general, what I can say is that the country is in a very good position on low carbon metrics, but we need to open the eyes to lose this great opportunities, great advantage that we have. That's the point that I have.
Thank you, Nelson. Last but not least, Leonardo. I mean, we heard from Nelson on how to keep a very interesting point, which is how to keep the energy matrix as clean as it has been. That's the challenge, seems to be, from Brazil, from Chile, and from Colombia. How do everyone wants to be where these three countries are? How do the Ukraine crisis and the oil and gas increasing prices, is it going to shift, or are we going to be able to maintain that energy matrix there? However, Mexico is not there. And so I would like to hear more about, given what has happened since you left office, just to understand the challenges more from a Mexican perspective, which is not there yet. It wants to be, but there are some other issues that might be of interest to this discussion. Leonardo, you're muted. Oh, I think he's frozen. So I'll get back to you, Leonardo, whenever you are able to connect again, because Leonardo is having some issues. So given what both Juan Carlos, Maria Fernanda, and Nelson have mentioned about, you all have mentioned the high oil and gas prices, high energy prices, the issues that we're facing with reliability. How do you see the role of oil and gas in the energy transition in your respective countries, or in Latin America, if you have a view, and particularly the role of gas as a transitional fuel? Maria Fernanda, if you want to start.
Well, Luisa, I do believe that gas is absolutely key in the energy transition. And that's something that we need to be very clear speaking about it. And the speed at which we will be able to do not rely on gas will depend to the speed of, I will say, two technologies really evolving to a commercial point, and that will be hydrogen and storage. Until storage and hydrogen are at a point where it can be commercially adoptable, gas will be absolutely key to maintain the reliability of the grid. And also from a transportation perspective, we will need oil for a long term until we have these evolutions. And I do believe that part of the role that we all need to do is to speak more loudly in terms of not because we're against climate policy, yes, but just because we are very realistic in terms of how humans need energy in all its sources. And that even though we have to be positive and invest a lot in R&D, we need to stay realistic in terms that we do not have yet the technologies to fully take out neither oil, and it will be longer for gas.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Let me go back, Leonardo. Sorry that you had a problem in your connection. So please, we would love to hear from your point of view these issues that we were discussing previously, but also how you see this question about natural gas.
Yes, certainly. And thanks very much, Luisa. And of course, it's a pleasure to be here with Maria Fernanda, Juan Carlos, and Nelson. I fully agree with the challenges already mentioned. And perhaps let me frame it like this. The main challenge, I think, it's how to balance short-term versus long-term. And specifically because, when you are in government, you're measured by your term in government. And typically, the energy sector is a long-term perspective sector. So whatever you do today will impact not only the current administration, but probably 3 or 4 more administrations. And that has a spillover effect, which is not completely internalized by the current administration. So let me give an example. Today, we are discussing about what's happening in Europe, in Ukraine and Russia. And there's interest to continue to invest in developing alternatives to supply natural gas from the main source. This is gonna have an effect for the long term, the investment in these new hydrocarbon assets. In Mexico, for instance, another example, we have been focusing a lot on the energy transition. We created the legal framework and different things. But the current administration has a fixation on legacy assets. And they, instead of investing in new technologies, in diversifying the portfolio, they wanted to re-strengthen the existing infrastructure and develop new legacy infrastructure, even though that's not the road that we as Mexicans decided to follow, but also the road that the international community has decided to follow. So I guess the main challenge, again, is how to balance this short-term versus the long-term priorities. Now, in terms of opportunities, certainly the whole region has an amazing wealth of natural resources. But let me also point out that the region has the cleanest electricity portfolio worldwide. So 6 out of every 10 megawatts produced in the region come from clean energy sources. So, if you actually take that into account, then if you take that into account, that we are the cleanest energy source, then the opportunity here is to showcase the leadership of the region, to showcase how did we balance, policies and regulation. And the other part is how can we move the last mile towards the energy transition. So I guess in that regard, I fully agree with Maria Fernanda in terms of research and development, but we actually can ride the wave of the energy transition precisely by demonstrating the leadership we have been exerting on not only the energy transition, but the actual policy today, the existing policy today for the energy sector. Now, let me also point out that the region is also the most urbanized region worldwide. So that's also another area of opportunity to take advantage of the different resources and assets we have. No? So it's difficult, as Juan Carlos was mentioning, how to connect the resources that are, across this very large and long country, from the sources of energy to the centers of consumption. But perhaps the opportunity there is how can we integrate all these wealth of resources. And let me point out an example from Paraguay and Brazil. Paraguay and Brazil already have a shared resource, hydro resource. And Paraguay actually supplies a very large amount of resources for the Brazilian power sector. And that contributes to improve the energy security of the Brazilian grid, but also to complement and generate resources, revenue for the Paraguayans. And that is a specific example of how can we take advantage of our domestic resources, our wealth of natural capital, and improve in a policy that actually what it required, it's a little bit of leadership and a little bit of infrastructure. And perhaps Maria Fernanda can inform a little bit about that effort in Colombia and the interconnection with Central America and Mexico. This project that at some point was supported, or it's continued to be supported by the IDB, when another Colombian was leading that institution. And Juan Carlos, certainly, he's transcending the borders. And that hydrogen initiative to connect Chile with Europe, the source with the demand, it's an amazing opportunity. And again, the opportunity is to take advantage of that leadership that is displayed in different regions.
Thank you, Leonardo. You bring to the table a very important way in which we improve energy security and energy reliability, which is energy integration. And I think Juan Carlos can talk about, I've heard Maria Fernanda in different forums talk about energy integration, and Juan Carlos, as a Minister of Energy of Chile, knows about the 4 pipelines that go back and forth, that were constructed to import natural gas from Argentina. So it's not only in electricity, it's also on gas that you have that potential. But Juan Carlos, would love to hear what the reactions are to Leonardo's points, and also in general, something that both Maria Fernanda and Nelson mentioned, which is hydrogen. Chile is the country that is much more advanced on hydrogen than in the region. It's a place where, a lot of people are learning about. And I think that's one of your points, Leonardo, is that there's a lot that the region already has done that is a best practice or can give lessons to other countries. And one of them is also hydrogen. So Juan Carlos, would love to hear about the discussions the issues that have been pointed out here.
Yes, so I fully agree with Maria Fernanda on the gas point she made. We need to make that case more strongly to the broader population. There's no energy transition in the power grid without natural gas, in our countries at least. We cannot get rid of gas overnight. So we need to use gas for a while, at least. That is very important. On integration, I think that's a very, very good point. It's very hard, though, I think. What I've found, it is hard. The technology is there, the business case are there, financing would be there, but politics sometimes get in the way, different regulations. So it's not that easy to reach the agreements at the political level. And I think that is partially a consequence of the different time horizons, right? So governments last in our country 4 years, in other countries 5 years, let's say 6, but a project of that magnitude takes much longer than that. So we need to make more efforts to try to set up a common vision of where we're going to go in integration and be persistent to accomplish those goals. And I think that's true for electricity and also for gas. Our experience with the integration with gas with Argentina was good for some years, but then we had a problem, as you know. So geopolitics and public perception and trust gets on the way as well. So it's not that easy, but I think the value that could be created by, having a more integrated energy system would be enormous. And on green hydrogen, I think the region has an enormous opportunity there. We started pushing that agenda more than 2 years ago because we realized very quickly that we have, 80 times the renewable resources we use today in our grid, right? So we could build solar and wind capacity that is 80 times bigger than the current size of our power grid. So we will never be able to take advantage of those resources. And the only way to take advantage of those is to somehow export that to the world. And the best way to do that as an energy vector is hydrogen. And when we talk about hydrogen, it's hydrogen or green ammonia or synthetic fuels and so on. We have seen that industry gain a lot of traction in the last couple of years. It's impressive how that is gaining momentum, I mean, as we speak. I think the Ukrainian-Russian conflict or the invasion by Russia, I hope will accelerate that agenda as well, because I think Europe was already aware that it will not be able to have all the renewable energy they need. And I think green hydrogen is the best way to get that energy, right? And I think in the end, in the hydrogen space, we see still this a little bit of a chicken or egg problem. Because, I mean, technology needs to, move faster to reduce costs, to make hydrogen competitive with fossil fuels. But that doesn't happen as quickly because the demand is not there. And the demand is not there because the cost is not low enough. So we have that kind of, we're spinning our wheels a little bit there. And I think that leaderships from companies, for example, Maersk made a big decision last year to build ships that will be running on synthetic fuels or methanol. And then guys go manufacture it, right? Produce it. And I think, Europe can do that as well with green hydrogen to accelerate that agenda. But I think the opportunity for our region is enormous. And I think, and with this I will finish, I think in hydrogen, we also have an opportunity to operate in an integrated way. Latin America itself can be a green hydrogen powerhouse if we combine the resources we have. And we have pipelines to move the hydrogen around, integrated infrastructure and so on. So that's not for this year or next year, but at some point we would need to draw that vision to try to work together in that direction.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Talking about thinking longer term, Nelson, you were talking about Brazil, biofuels, and the role that it has played, and also pre-salt. And we know that there has been a very significant push this year with the liberalization of the gas market in Brazil. Brazil was a very important seasonal importer of LNG last year at a time where supply was constrained, and that meant significant increases in prices for its imports of LNG. So, and it's also an example of a country that built a pipeline with Bolivia. So it's an example of gas integration. It's an example of thinking about pre-salt as the future of gas, of liberalizing and setting regulatory changes in order to develop gas domestically. So, and then you also have this I think this policy framework, which is agnostic in relation to how the hydrogen is produced. So you've been developing this hydrogen framework in which if it's blue or green, it doesn't matter. So it's a very interesting pragmatic approach. So we'd love to hear how you see these issues in Brazil. Okay.
Firstly, let's speak about the gas. I fully agree with everyone that the gas is very important for the energy security. The gas in Brazil, like you said, we are experimenting kind of attempt of opening, because the infrastructure, gas infrastructure in Brazil for many, many years, was of property of Petrobras, and Petrobras made a lot of constraints to access. But since last year, the new law aimed to create a new gas market. So we got a lot of things going on, but many actions to be taken, still to be taken by the regulator. And things are not moving as we expect with the speed wise. With regarding the hydrogen, Brazil has started, a process like I mentioned, but we are not in a position that Chile is today. But the good point is that the government is really backing the action, The Minister of Mines and Energy is pushing to have a more clear vision on the way we'll be, applying and using whatever gray or green gas. But I also like, Luisa, get back to what the oil and gas can do for this transition. We see that, most of the IOCs, most of the national oil companies, they change names, or they are really very much focused on the energy transition, especially the European ones. And I see that as a very good point, because we know to reach the net zero by year 50, a bunch of the money must be, applied for, a lot of investment. And we see that the IOCs companies, the oil and gas companies, with experience they have with the R&D, things like that, I believe that they can really support a lot the energy transition. Okay, in Brazil, I don't know why, but it seems that clearly Petrobras decided to concentrate the strategy on the pre-salt rather than making like the other companies, looking after the energy transition the way it should be done. That's my view, that Petrobras is not, putting this as a clear objective, a clear point, So those are the points. But I see the IOCs as very important, and the oil companies very important for the process.
Nelson, you bring a very important point, which is the financing aspect. And so we're running out of time, but I would really like if each of you can give me 1 minute on the issues that you see on the financing of the energy transition. And I'm going to start with Juan Carlos and then go to Leonardo.
Thank you, Luisa. Yeah, so financing on the power grid, we don't see a lot of problems. Renewables are profitable already. We have in Chile a well-developed system to award long-term PPA contracts to generation companies. So that's very useful for financing. Our electricity sector works, it's dollar denominated. It's denominated in US dollars. So that helps a lot because it takes out the currency risk for investors and opens an enormous amount of capital markets. So that's working very well. And there are other sectors of the energy transition beyond the power grid, where I think the financing aspect is more complicated. For example, energy efficiency. There are many projects that are profitable, but still to access financing is not that easy. For households, for example, installing solar panels, it's good business. You recoup your investment in a reasonable, time frame. But if a family doesn't have the money to buy the solar panel in the first place, even if the return is good enough, they won't be able to do that. So we are giving some subsidies, aggregating demand to reduce costs and so on. And on electromobility, we see the same problem with private vehicles, but we're seeing more traction in public transportation because those buses travel a lot of mileage per year, so they amortize the investment very quickly.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Leonardo, very quickly, because we have 1 more minute, and I'll try to get to Maria Fernanda as well.
Sure. I guess we have to take advantage of these pledges that have been made by the private sector, and especially the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero that was launched last year in Glasgow. That on one hand, because it's a disclosure that they are interested and they are willing to put a very large amount of resources. But the other is depending exactly upon the specific technology and or subsector, it requires a different set of investment vehicles to make that happen. And I agree, energy efficiency at the household level is different than energy efficiency at the city level or at the industry level. But perhaps one other area that I can think of that would be really relevant for the energy transition, and it's not hydrocarbon, is geothermal. And the region, it's actually very well endowed of geothermal resources. Here, I think the risk is, or the challenge is to reduce the risk of exploration. But in terms of finance, I think it has the materiality and the potential revenue to make that happen.
Maria Fernanda, 30 seconds to leave because we're 1 minute ahead.
Okay, I do see challenges from the current environment. I will say that interest rates going up, it's going to make that the period for the payback for the capex that you have to put either in energy efficiency, renewables, or any sorts of things to make a substitution will become a challenge. And also one thing that can, I will say, derail a little bit the energy transition, it's the money that countries and Latin America, but mostly all of the world, it's having to put right now in subsidies for gasoline and gas and all that has to do with prices. So we have two big risks that were in there in the last 5 years, that's something that we have to put our attention on and how to make sure we can keep track on energy transition despite these issues.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Thank you, Juan Carlos, Leonardo, Nelson, for such a fascinating discussion. Thank you to the Colombia Energy Symposium as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for our insightful panelists. I think all the attendees find really interesting what you have to say. Thank you, Luisa. Thank you all. We will have a quick break until 2:20, and then we're going to have our policy far chat about Russia and the geopolitics of energy security with Olivia Lazar. So stay tuned. 2:20, we will continue.